And now, another Rock Sports Network presentation.
Welcome into this week's episode of Homegrown. I'm Brendan McDaniels. We're so happy to have Roosevelt Bouie joining us. He is the pride of Kendall High School, was a legend at Syracuse University, went on to play professional basketball over in Europe, and he came right back to the Rochester area and made this home in his retirement. And he's also one of my good friends and former colleagues. Roosevelt Bouie joining us. Rosie, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Brendan, it's my pleasure. It's great to be back on the screen with you.
I know it's been a couple of years, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later, but you're joining us from Henderson Harbor tonight outside of Oswego on Lake Ontario because you're really there doing your first love, which is fishing.
Yes, actually, I was fortunate. I started playing basketball when I was 14 years old. I started fishing when I was 6. So I'm pretty sure I'm a better fisherman. Although today, man, I took a beat down. I got drowned, I got wet, came back, made a couple of good hits at the end, and looking forward to tomorrow, my first fishing tournament.
Yeah, I told you when we were texting earlier this morning, I said, hey, sometimes you get rained out, but you're just going to go back at it, right?
We're definitely going to go back at it. You can always look forward to great fishermen. The best thing about it is that when you finish fishing, you go to a great restaurant and have some good food. So
it's a perfect lifestyle. Well, Rosie, you mentioned that you started playing basketball at 14, and you're a 7-foot guy, and there's really not that many 7-footers that hang around the Kendall area. So what were your teenage years like, kind of really being like this overgrown giant in this small rural community?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I started, interesting enough, I came to Kendall and I had a bunch of, all my cousins were there. So I had cousins that were playing soccer, baseball, basketball. Pretty much my cousin Aaron was the mayor of the town. So when I walked in there, Aaron was 6'4", and I get off the bus and come to school because I actually changed schools. I was going to Holly School up until age 13. And then they were selling the house that we're in. We couldn't afford it at the time. So we moved to Kendall. And it was great because at age 13, instead of having any problems when I moved there, I had probably 15 of my cousins that went to school there. And so I had competition to play against. My cousin Aaron, he was like the vice president of student council. And so I had to live up to certain standards. My cousin Nate was supposed to be the heir apparent at 6'6", and he had, I say a 48-inch vertical, but there are two kind of people. There are people that can jump as high as they have to. That was me. And then, I'm sorry, I would jump as high as I can. And then there's other people that can jump as high as they have to. Well, Nate was one of those guys at 6'6". At 6'6", he was blocking 3-pointers one step outside the foul line. So I was like, holy smokes. So, but walking around school there, we became known because we were, we liked going to school. So everybody saw us. They looked at us as future basketball players, but down the line, we had to be very good students first, because that's one thing that my mother, the first thing she did when I was starting the school year, all 5 feet 4 inches, 110 pounds of her. By the way, at age 14, I used to pick her up and kiss her before I went to school. And so she'd walk into the class, she'd walk into school every day, and she'd tell them, like, listen, I don't want anybody putting their hands on my children. But if they do something wrong, give them a letter. They'll bring it to me. I'll solve the problem. You will never, I can tell you, Brendan, right now, I never got a letter sent home to my mother. I don't know what would happen, and I'm fine with that.
I was gonna say, I'm not surprised at all knowing you that you never got a letter sent home. But Rosie, you talk about academics, and those are obviously important, and that went through to your time at Syracuse, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you really became known as a basketball player at Kendall. Your 4 years, you had 4 sectional titles, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you only lost 1 game in high school.
1. That's correct. You know, it was kind of funny, and it's one of those things that I think should be disqualified, but it happened. What originally happened is we were playing against Oakfield, Alabama, a team that they're very, very tough physical players. But 3 minutes into the game, someone took a shot. I went up, I tipped it in, and I came down and I stepped on my man's ankle, and I turned my ankle completely. So I played on one leg the rest of the game. We lost by 3 or 4 points. Went in the locker room, took my sneaker off, and my ankle just went. I couldn't stand up, and they measured it was 17 inches around.
Wow.
So, but it was during Christmas time, so I had 3 weeks to come back. We ended up playing them again, and we beat them by 25. So we kind of erased that, let them know that it was just a fluke.
All was right in the world at that point. So, Rosie, you're a 7-foot guy, mid 1970s. You graduated from high school in 1976. A lot of major schools were recruiting you at the time, and you developed a relationship with a young assistant coach at Syracuse. And I don't know if we ever learned whatever happened to that guy, a guy by the name of Jim Boeheim. You really got close with him, but he wasn't the head coach. Roy Danforth was the head coach. So, I mean, at that point, how did your relationship develop with Jim Boeheim, and how did Syracuse kind of become the front runner during the recruitment process?
Well, it kind of started out because at the time we were, I was playing basketball. I just finished my sophomore year, and I averaged 19 points and 15 rebounds. So I was, and I was at the time I was 6'9". I was probably 165, 170 pounds. So the whole thing. So time for basketball camp came around. Coach was checking around. My high school coach said, no, to work to get better. My cousin Aaron used to go to basketball camp. I think it was Survey basketball camp, someplace in Pennsylvania or somewhere. So we're thinking about going to basketball camp, and someone dropped. I don't know who the contact was, but I was pretty sure that back then the colleges just send out information packets to all the schools in the surrounding areas, and that's where I first heard about the Syracuse basketball camp. So I went there at age 16. And that's when I met Coach Boeheim. He was a big man of 30 years old, and when he walked into the gym, it was so interesting because he had on a pair of light colored plaid shorts, and he had on a pair of leather Converse, which had to be like $40 at the time.
Old school.
And he didn't have his feet in him. He was walking on the back of them like slippers. And he walked past me. I was like, and he was a man of a few words. So there was immediately a connection, because I've always felt that you have people in your life that are similar to other people in your life. So I knew that my thinking as a child was, if I got a coach, I'm going to want that coach to be something similar to my father. Reason being, I know I'm going to do something wrong and I mess up. So if he ever yells at me, I'll take my position and I'll be like, okay, I did something wrong. But to have a coach like a coach that yelled and screamed a lot, that's not something I was ever used to. So I may have a tendency to respond poorly and then get myself in trouble. So I said, let me do a cool thing. At the time, Coach Boeheim and my dad, you couldn't get either one of them to say more than 5 words at a time. But going to basketball camp, it was very easy to understand that he knew a lot about basketball. And I became interested then. But as time went on, I was contacted by Michigan State, Georgia Tech, Duke, Santa Clara, Oklahoma State. I went to visit all these schools, and St. Bonaventure. And then after I remember being, I went down to Duke. I get to the campus, and it was like all these flowers and girls in bikinis, and the weather was beautiful. And I remember going back home, and I looked into the mirror, and I was like, I can't go to school there. I'll flunk out in 2 weeks. There's too many distractions. They had fishing ponds on campus. There's a pool. So I was like, oh wow, I gotta be smart about this. So then I started traveling around. And I said, you know what? Then I started realizing I'd be gone for 2 days. And while I was gone for those 2 days, I was like, I was just waiting to go back home. So I was like, okay, let's be realistic about this. I better start looking closer to home. And so I started looking at St. Bonaventure, and I was looking at Syracuse University. Now, I was looking at them because they were close. Syracuse had just in 1975 they won they went to the Final Four, so they started to become more and more in focus. But as Coach Boeheim was really laid back, you had Roy Danforth he had that Brill cream comb back, that 3-piece suit, cigarette and a whiskey. And so I was like, man, that's a city slicker for a country boy like me. I was like, he never did. Now, mind you, never did anything wrong, never said anything wrong, but it's all about who you could relate to. You know, Coach Boeheim coming from a small town, being kind of laid back, soft spoken, it was easier, it's more palatable for me. And he would come out to our Kendall games, and up in the corner, the other coaches that were there, they would like sneer at him because he had his own place up there in the corner. He'd come sit, watch the games, and it was just slowly but surely. It was easier for me to relate to him. Believe it or not, Coach Boeheim did not yell or scream when we went to school there. And I say that because I remember after we left, he said, you know, you guys set me up because all I used to do is go in the gym, throw the basketball out there, and you guys used to beat each other up for 2 hours. I'd blow the whistle till you get out of here. So he was, you know, Miles. The only time we saw him yell was at referees. So that's where the initial contact started. He liked the fact that my high school coach, Coach Dick Reynolds, said, listen, I believe that you're a starter. So he would call out the starters before every game. After that game finished, that next week, he says, I know who should be my starters by Friday. Now you got this week to show me that you're a starter. So we actually went out there. We had some of the best games. Then they also said, this is the deal. The second best team in the league is on our bench. So as a starter, you get to play the first half and about 4.5, 5 minutes of the third quarter. And then these guys are going to play. And so he said, so when the game starts, you got to be ready. So what happened is he had when it was 2 minutes, when they had a 2-minute whistle, we had to come over and towel off because we were sweating profusely. Other teams used to look at us like, what's wrong with you? They're fixing their shirts up and we're sweating like wet rats. The jump ball would go up, we'd be up by 15 points. And I remember getting to Syracuse and Marty Burns was there. And Marty Burns said, listen, I thought it was going to be a problem. You know, you come to Syracuse, but then we started doing the running drills and you just shut up and ran. He's like, I knew we were going to have, we're ready to go because now we had a center that could keep with the fast break and run the floor. So these are all things that Coach Boeheim saw right away. And I think he was also looking from the players that he brought in, he was looking for players that were winners. And, you know, he wasn't the coach yet, but his attitude was go with players that are hard workers and that don't mind running because let me tell you, Brandon, I ran so much my first year. If I fell asleep on the chair and you took a glass and tapped the spoon against it, I'd jump up and run out the room. And I come back like, wait a minute, what's going on? We just ran all the time. So that's how we got that you know, we just had that connection. You know, Coach Boeheim was from Lyons, New York, small town. I'm from Kendall, New York, small town near Lake Ontario. So it was kind of more of a fit. And I guess he understood more how to handle me because, you know, some people just can't yell at. He never yelled at me, so I don't. As I talked to Etan said, well, that wasn't the case for me. So.
Well, you got an opportunity to play for Coach Boeheim. We're going to take a timeout right now, but there is a time where Rosie almost didn't play for Coach Boeheim. We're going to talk about that. We'll also get into his Syracuse career and his post-Syracuse career. This is Homegrown, and we'll be back right after this.
If you're living with pain or recovering from surgery and don't know where to start, Lattimore Physical Therapy can help. The Lattimore Promise includes an individual diagnosis with a highly trained licensed physical therapist on your first visit, a personalized treatment plan, communication with your doctor, and a continued personal care plan. You're never more than minutes away from pain relief. Visit LattimorePT.com.
Lattimore Physical Therapy.
Bill Gray's Sports Bar Grill and Tap Room, home of the world's greatest cheeseburger with a choice of 28 ice-cold, imported, and locally brewed craft beers on tap. Specials every day of the week. Experience Bill Gray's Sports Bar Grill and Tap Room.
Gimme Bill Gray's. You'll get more for your money. You'll get much greater value. You talk to kind, courteous people who really care. They're so sincere. I recommend them to my family. I recommend them to my friends. They've gone way above and beyond my great expectations.
We're back on Homegrown, and our guest this week is Syracuse legend Roosevelt Bouie, and we're at the part of the program where we were talking about Rosie going to Syracuse University. And Rosie, that almost didn't happen because, as we mentioned, Roy Danforth was the head coach. He left and took the AD and head coach job at Tulane, but it wasn't a guarantee that Jim Boeheim was going to be the next Syracuse head coach in 1976. He almost went somewhere else, and it almost forced you to rethink your decision. So tell everybody what happened. Where was that near miss with Coach Boeheim?
Well, it was kind of interesting because as everything boiled down, I knew I wanted to be close to home. And then so I started to look seriously at St. Bonaventure, Niagara, and then Syracuse. My eyes had always been on Syracuse because that's what I knew. I knew how they practiced. I knew how they played. I knew how our coach worked with me during the time that I was there. Then I said, but wait a minute, he's not the head coach. So the person that was in charge of what I had to do is not the person I spent the most time with. So I was kind of hesitating there. And then it was just, I had a big decision to make, and I wasn't ready to make it because I wasn't sure. And then I came to school. I remember getting off the school bus, and I saw my Coach Reynolds was standing in the door holding a newspaper. I thought, that's strange. So I walk in, he goes, hey, your buddy just became head coach of Syracuse University. And when that happened, because St. Bonaventure and Syracuse, so break the team down, all their every position, the upperclassmen were all great players. That's at Syracuse and St. Bonaventure. And the one thing that that both of them did not have was a center. I mean, they just needed, you could have put a chair on the floor and they would have been good. So if you had a raw center from a small school that needed time to understand the game, and the only thing I knew about the game of basketball at the time was I knew I could run wide open for 40 minutes, and you're either going to die the first half or the second half, and I was going to win.
Well, and Rosie, the fact is that Jim Boeheim didn't really hear right away from Syracuse, and he almost took another job. He almost became the head coach at U of R.
Yes, I heard the story. I was golfing with Shaw. He played at Syracuse. He was an attorney, law firm. He said he was on the board of directors, and he said, yeah, one day, they told Coach Boeheim that they're going to open it up to a national search, for a head coach. And he said he showed up. He said, I want to talk to you guys. He walked into the meeting and he said, you guys need to make me the head coach of Syracuse University. If you do, I'll bring you Roosevelt, Bouie, and Louis Orr. If you don't, I'm going to leave here and take the job at the University of Rochester, and then I'm going to take those guys there. And everybody sat there in the room was like, look at this guy. And they're like, oh, okay. Now, his idea was perfect. I hadn't talked to Coach Boeheim about it or previous to that, but when he became the head coach, it took about 48 seconds once I walked through. That's how long it took me to walk from this door to coach's office to call the basketball office and tell them I was going to be going to Syracuse.
Well, and Jim Satterlin, who was the head coach at St. Bonaventure at the time, who's now the radio analyst for Syracuse University, he was a little upset with you because he thinks you did what? You played for the wrong what?
Wrong. He said played for the wrong coach.
Played for the wrong Jim.
Listen, the funny thing is that, I think it was the Coaches versus Cancer. I went there, and his wife was there, and she looked at him. She was like, "This could have been us." So, he's a great guy, and I'm friends with him still to this day.
And so, Rosie, you get to Syracuse, and fellow freshman Louis Orr comes in. You guys basically take the two lockers in the corner because those were available, and you guys became what might be one of the top 10 all-time college basketball duos in history.
Well, it's kind of funny because we came into the first time I even heard Louis Orr's name was when I walked into the locker room, sat down, and he came in and sat down next to me. I knew a little bit about Dale Shackelford because he'd been coming to Syracuse basketball camp. He working in camp, so I knew about him. Marty Burns, we did the number one seeding banquet every year. So the number one seed teams would come there, and Marty's team was always number. So I knew Marty, and I saw him, and we were cool. We talk once a year, and then he's at Syracuse, so I knew there's some good athletes there, but it was when I met Lewis, I was looking at this little guy. I was like, man. Now, mind you, he was 6'9", 169 pounds, and I was 7 feet, 190 pounds. So nobody noticed how thin I was because Lewis was there. But the first thing that I started noticing in all of our running drills, he looked like he was going to fall down, but I finished behind him in every one of them. And I was like, wait a minute. This kid is tougher than everybody thinks. And the other thing that would happen is we started playing, Coach Boeheim would rotate. Lewis would get minutes at the 3, at the 4, and sometimes at the 5 spot, in freshman year. So he played where he could, what's that saying? Get in where you can fit in, or fit in where you can get in. That's exactly what he did. So I got to have a lot of respect for him, because you got a freshman year, you're at a Division I school, and you got to learn 2-3 different spots, because you can get thrown at any given time. They ask you to go in. You can either just sit on the bench or you can play. He would just go in there and roll them up, and he was. It used to crack me up, because I still remember one game at Manley Fieldhouse. So I thought I had a pretty good game, and I'm walking out of the gym. And they're like, Roosevelt Bouie, 19 points, 19 rebounds. I was like, whoa, pretty good. And before I get to the locker room, I hear Louis Orr, 19 points, 19 rebounds. I was like, what? How did? And I started thinking, I would get double teamed. I'd miss a shot. He put it back in. Like, I'd have 2 guys hanging on my back when I was scoring. When he was scoring, I'd miss. He'd tip it back up. I was like, so who's smarter? His scoring was all done on tip in, offensive rebounds, just quick, smart. He was really, 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 really smart about the game of basketball. So it was just great to listen to him talk basketball. Like I said before, my knowledge of basketball was, I will work harder than you, and I will win. And I firmly believe that, and that's what I did. I said, I'm going to learn basketball eventually, but right now I'm going to hang my hat on. If I saw a guy, so in high school, the tallest guy I played against was 6'4", and they were soccer players. So they couldn't stop me in the post, but they could all run. So I didn't want to get to score on somebody and then get scored on. So I learned how to, really pick them up and put them down. So that's what I hung my hat on for a few years, until they taught me a little bit about basketball at Syracuse.
Well, you learned a lot of basketball at Syracuse. You guys won 100 games, only lost 18. It really set the building blocks for Syracuse to be a success down the road. But the Louie and Bouie show, after 4 years, were ready to move on, and you guys had opportunities in the NBA. Lewis took an opportunity in the NBA with the New York Knicks. You had an opportunity with the Dallas Mavericks, but you opted not to take that. What happened after you got drafted by the Mavericks, and what led you to go to the European leagues?
Well, it was kind of funny, because I was pretty much convinced that whatever, my attitude was, hey, I still can outrun somebody. I'm going to run them until they die. So whoever they put on me, I'm ready. The only problem was I got drafted by the Dallas Mavericks their first year, which translates into a whole bunch of losses. They didn't win. I played 16 years after, and Dallas still hadn't won 20 games. So my thought was this: high school, I lost 1 game. At Syracuse, we lost 18 games. I didn't lose 20 games in damn near a decade. If I went to the Dallas Mavericks, I'd have lost that. I lost that in a month. And so I started thinking. So anyway, I go up there and I talk to. I never report the camp. So I go talk to Noam Sanju, who was the general manager. He had a camp in the Adirondacks. He gave me a call. He was going to be up at his camp. He had a couple of players come up there, Tommy Lagarde and somebody else. I can't remember. Anyway, we went out there. We started playing, and I felt that I could hold my own with these guys. Especially Tommy Lagarde he had a knee brace on. And I was like, oh, I know I'm going to run him. So I'm already calculating. I'm going to run him until he's unconscious. I'm just going to keep running. But anyway, so we talked for a while, and they said, well, we're in it, so we're looking forward to getting here at camp. And so I said, I played in Italy. I'm thinking about going over, taking a look at the Italian league. And he says, well, I know it's always been your dream to play in the NBA. And when he said that, I was like, my mouth almost fell open, because anybody that knew me, it was always my dream to be a successful businessman, you know, to get involved in the business world and figure out how it's done and be successful at it, even as a little child. And I'm thinking, my life is in the hands of a man that doesn't know anything about me. And now, had he not said that when I was walking away, I was all down for coming to camp and going to work. But he said that, and I was like, man, he didn't even take the time to just know that anybody that knew anything about me knew that you never heard NBA come out of my mouth ever. It was always Syracuse University, getting better and moving forward and learning and trying to become the best person that I could be to set myself up for business. And he said that, and then right after he said those words, I shook his hand, I turned around, and I was like, I'm going to Italy. Because these guys so we went and played there my sophomore year, went to Italy. They had been following me since my sophomore year. Now, I was, like I said, I was 190 pounds when I went over there, 7 foot, 190 pounds. And I made two all-tournament teams and MVP of the third tournament. And I weighed 190 pounds. I graduated at 235. And they were like, holy crap, we really want him. So they sent somebody over, and they called me about every 2 or 3 days, and they talked to me, and they wanted to find out more about me and kept offering me more money. And I was like, well, let me wait a couple more weeks and see what happens. So they offered me the same money guaranteed. Just had to pass my physical. Well, everybody knows when you're 18 years old, and when you're 22 years old, you can stay out all night and pull a car up a hill, get 8 hours sleep in a bowl of Wheaties, and you can pass a physical.
Well, and so, Rosie, the other big thing too with the European leagues and the Italian leagues, they played essentially half the number of games. So you could play a lot longer in Italy for the same money, more money. That's really what you did in your career. Yeah,
it was pretty wild, because they were offering me the same money to play 60 games less a year. And not only that, once I got to Italy, I found out that the coaches couldn't even get close to the players until after the professor, they had a professor of athletics that took all the players when they got there, and they worked with them until they got them to a certain peak performance with flexibility, strength, drills, and then they turned them over to the basketball coach. So basically, if a lot of Americans had the problem because they'd come over, they didn't like doing all the athletic drills and whatnot, so they wouldn't do them well. And they said, well, I'm a basketball player, I don't have to do that. They got sent home. So it was very important that you had to go through this athletic coach, who, by the way, might I add, I never had a strain, a pulled groin, I never had an injury, because this guy, he literally had what looked like a dossier on every player, the things that they liked, the things they didn't like, what they needed to work on, and he consistently worked on those things. In the beginning of the year, he was there a lot, but even throughout the year, in different times during the year, where you start getting a little fatigued, he's like, listen, I noticed you're starting to stand up too straight. Got to get down more. So he'd work out these drills to help us stay in peak form. And this was in 1982. Now, back then, every college team now has that person. Well, they had him for 5 years before they had him in college. And I was just amazed at the way that they would have you feeling in peak condition. Like I would walk out on the floor and I was just like, okay, who am I going to run over today? That was the deal.
Well, Rosie, you're often running in the Italian league in the early to mid 1980s, but the NBA came calling one more time, and we're going to talk about that when we come back. We're also going to get into a little bit more of what Rosie's been up to post-career, including him getting into TV and what he's doing right now. We've got a lot more coming up on Homegrown right after this.
How would you like it today? How do you like your Zweigels? You know Zweigels, you know taste, but hot off the grill's not the only place. See what you're missing right in your kitchen. Put a smile on your family's face. Chicken sausage of every kind, great taste is what you'll find. How would you like it today?
Remember the days when cheeseburgers were $3.99 and you could get a pint for $2? You still can at Bill Gray's. $3.99 for the world's greatest cheeseburger and $2 for a blue light pint. Throwback Thursdays at Bill Gray's.
Gimme, gimme, gimme Bill Gray's.
If you're living with pain or recovering from surgery and don't know where to start, Lattimore Physical Therapy can help. The Lattimore Promise includes an individual diagnosis with a highly trained licensed physical therapist on your first visit, a personalized treatment plan, communication with your doctor, and a continued personal care plan. You're never more than minutes away from pain relief. Visit LattimorePT.com.
Lattimore Physical Therapy.
Back on Homegrown, we're with Roosevelt Bouie, and he was in the Italian League in the mid-1980s. He'd spurned the NBA back in 1980 and didn't want to go to the Dallas Mavericks because they were an expansion team, and he felt like he had a better opportunity over in Europe. But the mid-1980s, the Showtime Lakers had a little bit of interest in Rosie and almost gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. So, Rosie, what happened with the Lakers in the mid-1980s?
Well, now this is all hearsay. But that's how everything was back then. There was no email, no tweeting or anything. I got wind that Cream was getting up there in age, and they're looking for something. They're looking for a young backup that he could groom into being a better player. And I got word that either Coach Boeheim had talked to Jerry West, and they started looking for players that were playing in Europe right now. So I was they actually contacted the Dallas Mavericks to ask them if they could have my rights, because I never went to camp, so Dallas still had my rights. So this is 5 years later, and the Dallas Mavericks said, no, we don't want to give you his rights because we want him to come here and play. And they still were winning 16, 17 games a year. And at that time, I played 2 years with Rudy Hackett, my idol, who had come to Kendall to talk to me, and I was just like, oh. So I'm playing with Rudy Hackett, and I played with him for 3 years. And I'll tell you a little secret. In those 3 years, my shooting percentage from the field was, I shot 67%, 68%, and 69% from the field. I finished in second place in percentage all 3 years, because Rudy shot 68, 69, and 70% from the field. I finished in second place behind the guy and I was shooting damn near 70% from the field. So it was great. It was great to play with Rudy, but it was, getting an opportunity to play in the Italian League was, at the time, they were the second best league in the world. So it was great to go there and to go to some place where they really, really wanted me. They came after me. They wanted me they got me there. They treated me wonderfully. I got to speak another language. I started feeling like I had a little Italian blood in me. They just said I was born in the wrong country, but it was good stuff.
Well, and Rosie, over there in Italy too, I mean, you became an instant celebrity. I mean, not only were you playing basketball, the sponsorships came in, you had a radio show for a time. Yeah. So, I mean, you were really like larger than life in Italy.
Well, it was so funny because when I first came there, when I left Kendall and I came to Syracuse, I said, okay, Roosevelt, you're nobody, you're back to zero, you got to start all over, nobody's going to know you, you got to put in the work. And then I got to Italy, I was like, well, same thing, you're back to zero, nobody knows you, you got to roll your sleeves up, put in the work. And I remember saying, like, nobody's going to know me, and I walked past a pane glass window, and I looked in, and I got about 2 feet from the car, and somebody said, guarda, quello è Bouie. They're like, look, that's Bouie. And I was like, I just got here. I looked down. I have a white Mercedes with the tag of the city that I was in, and I'm 7 feet tall and black in Italy. So I don't know why I thought I was going to be invisible, but yeah, it was truly an amazing thing. And the other thing that I did is I immediately wanted to learn to speak the language, because they felt that I was actually. They were sad for me because I wasn't living with my family, because in Italy, you don't move out of the house unless you're married. So I'm coming home every night, and they're like pastries hanging on my door. They're bringing plates of food over for me to eat. And I was just like, wait a minute. I'm a young guy. I'm getting paid handsomely. I'm living in a foreign country driving a Mercedes. So I'm like, and they felt sorry for me. I was like, well, okay. but it was just a great time. And I made it a point to learn to speak the language, to go out, and I used to ride my bicycle. I have a bicycle that probably comes up to here on you. I would ride my bicycle everywhere through the city. I'd park it by a tree, and I'd sit down and I'd read books. And first starts out, kids would come up to me. Then the kids would go home and tell their parents. Then I started getting a couple of tickets from general admission tickets. I give them to the kids that were the best in their English class. I said, make sure before the game that you come over. There's a 5-minute stretch where I go over a 5-minute period that I stretch before the game. So make sure you come over and say hi. And they would come over. Started out being 3 people, then 15, then 40, then 90. There's like a whole mob, and they had to stop doing it. But that's the way that I truly got into being a part of the city. And it started out by these little kids. I'm outside washing my car, and about 15 kids started walking over toward me. They're like 7, 8, 9 years old. They're like, Bouie, and they're like, come here. And so I follow them, and there's a fruit tree in Italy. They call it kaki, and it's really, really super sweet. And the kids had picked all the fruit that they could reach. They took me by the hand, brought me over there, had me pick all the fruit at the upper branches. Then they broke it open, let me taste it. So that was another group of kids that I got to know, and it just felt like it's like, okay, I'm not at home, but I'm in a good place.
Well, and Rosie, after you ended your career, you played your final year in Spain. And then if anybody's learned anything off of this show so far, they know you're a small town country boy. So when you retired, you immediately moved back to Kendall and kind of set up your post life back in your hometown.
Yes, I did, because I was told that when you live out the country for a long time and you move back to the States, it's best if you move back to a place that you know, because everything's going to be different. Brendan, I tried to pack to move back to Italy every Thursday for 4 months. It was so tough, because not only was I mourning having been away from Italy, having lived there for 16 years, and it was no longer there, and all the people that I got to know after college, which are the friends that you keep for life. When I came back to the friends that I left, they were all working. They all had families. They all had kids. They were all busy. So I ended up spending a lot of time by myself. And I was like, man, I was actually here for 3 months before I realized that I could go shopping 24 hours. I was always running out to the store because they closed at 12 and they closed at 7. So I was like, oh, I got to run to the store. And they're like, what are you talking about? It said, hey, you can call somebody and they'll bring food to your house. I was like, get the heck out of here. So that's how long I was in Italy. So
The little luxuries of life, like 24-hour grocery shopping. But Rosie, about 10 years or so, you got a call to become one of us and go into broadcasting. How did that come about?
Listen, I'm trying to think. I started doing something with the Rochester Razor Sharks. They were the first to actually ask me to come back and start doing something. I did the radio. I did the radio show on Wham, I believe. And then I ended up doing for the Razor Sharks. I ended up doing, when they did a couple TV games, I did those. And then in the year 2000, I actually traveled with Dave Pash to do color with the orange. And then after that, I realized, like, you know what? It's talking about my style is kind of talking about as if I was sitting home on the couch with my friends, and not too technical, just keep it bare, simple, so people can understand. And I enjoyed it, And then I meet up with people like yourself who actually know what you're doing all the time, and it makes people look even better. So and once it was so funny because when I went in there, I got a call from Time Warner. Steve Arvon wanted to talk to me about doing a show, and he explained a little bit to me. And he's also a Syracuse graduate, and I had contacted him in the past and mentioned things that I was thinking about doing, and he always gave me good advice. But then eventually he called me and said, "Hey, listen, I want you to come in here and work." And then I felt just like I did when I changed leagues. I was like, okay, I'm going back to zero. I know nothing. I gotta put on my learning hat, and I gotta learn how to do all this stuff all over again. And I must say, at Time Warner, they made me feel like I was really, really smart. And it was because of that little ear thing you put in your ear. Somebody telling you things that you don't know and what you need to know, and all you have to do is pretend like, oh, I knew that.
Well, and Rosie, more importantly, and I had that opportunity to sit next to you on that Orange Overtime set for a few years when we did the show. And I mean, you brought a unique perspective, and you brought that kind of everyman perspective to the game of basketball. And that's the biggest thing with analysts is can they explain it to you on your own level? Like, do they not get too technical? And that's really what you did. And something that I'm eternally jealous of you for, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the second year we did the show, you had an opportunity to go to the Final Four and work on network TV at TNT with Tom Wormy and do the Syracuse National semifinal game. And I'll never forget. And I was like, oh my God, like Rosie's hitting the pinnacle of our profession. Like, look at this. And I remember I turned the game on. I was sitting with my son, Aaron, who you know very well. And you know my trademark is this pocket square right here. And we turned the game on. The first thing Aaron says when you come on screen, he goes, "Rosie's got a pocket square." And I said, yes. I'm like, I've finally broken him down. But talk about that opportunity to do the Final Four with TNT, national television audience, talking about your alma mater. I mean, that's unbelievable.
You know, I had gone, before we'd gone up and done a couple games. We did the spring game, I guess it was, the Midnight Madness. Did a couple games there. Then we did a couple games before the season started. And while I was up there, I remember talking to Sue Edson, and she said, I said, listen, I would, if there's anything else that comes up, I'm letting you know right now, I would absolutely love to do it. I mean, you're not going to find a more loyal, you know, I said, I will talk about basketball as best I can, but I like Syracuse University. And she said, well, I'll keep that in mind. And I'll be doggone, the team was struggling here and there, and then they're playing better, they're playing even better. And then next thing you know, I get a call, and I'm like Rosie I got a call from Turner Broadcast, like, listen, we're going to be doing this alternative broadcast. We want you to come down there and be. Would you entertain that idea? And I said, I was like, yes. And it was absolutely amazing. I was in the green room with Charles Barkley and who was there? Charles and Kenny Smith, and there was Reggie Miller. And it was so funny to see those guys react behind in the green room, because it's just like they were sitting at home, they were fussing back and forth and doing stuff. I just realized that, I was there. And then it didn't dawn on me till we get there to the Final Four, and the president pulls up. They stopped the president about 150 yards away. We drove right up to the door and got out and went inside. I was like, it felt kind of good when they said, Mr. Bouie, there will be a limo to pick you up. What's your address? And I give my address. This big black limo comes out to pick me up, take me to the airport, fly first class down to Houston, bring me to the hotel, another limo, and I get inside. Charles Barkley standing there, and I was like, listen, I went with Charles. I said, I hadn't seen Charles since it was probably 2002 in Barcelona. He came for a game to play during the summer, and I said, you probably don't remember me. He goes, yeah, Roosevelt, Bouie, Syracuse University. I was like, oh. I said, well, Charles, I got to tell you one thing. I said, when I see you pick up the microphone, I put on a seatbelt and I pull it tight and I hold on to my chair, because I don't ever know what's going to come out your mouth, but it's freaking hilarious. I said, keep doing what you're doing. And that was, we got a lot of laughs on that. But that was, hey, with a pocket hanky, I was there.
That's right. You did it, and you did a great job on that. And then, unfortunately, another year later, Spectrum Time Warner shuts down, and you and I were out of jobs. And I got a call from you, and you said, "Hey, I got this idea. Let's keep doing this Syracuse show, but we're going to do it in a retirement home, and we're going to do it on Facebook." And that you and I did that for a year, and that was a wonderful experience. And we had a Dale Shackelford on to that, and unfortunately, I had to bow out because you guys are going to Syracuse a lot, and I'm here in Rochester with you. I've got 2 teens in my house and a young baby, so I couldn't travel. But you and Dale have been doing this show, Orange Appeal, for a couple of years now, and you guys got a huge following. You go to Syracuse a lot, and I mean, you guys are getting to do what you love, talking Syracuse basketball.
Absolutely. And the other thing I got to keep in mind is Dale just moved to Delray Beach, Florida.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So, yeah, he just moved to Delray Beach, Florida. So we're going to be, hey, there's the funny thing about doing Facebook Live, I found a sponsor, bought the equipment, and then I said, I'm sitting down there going through Google, and I figured out how to turn it on 15 minutes before we did our first show. And we did it, and we've been going strong ever since there. You know, when you have an idea, we had a great following. Now I'm also looking into doing something on Twitch TV. On Twitch TV, and with some guys that I work with with Seth that I work with up at Galaxy from ESPN Studios in Syracuse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And but I'm also still I love Facebook, but not only on Orange Appeal. Orange Appeal, we have followers. We have about 1,500 followers, and I just happened to glance at my Facebook page. I got about 5,000. So I was like, maybe I should be doing something over on my Facebook page, because actually during this little hiccup that we had here, I was sitting at home, so I just turned on my equipment there, and I just started talking. And after the first show, I had 600 views. I had 140 comments. I'm like, I was talking about Kendall basketball and my mom and my sisters. I'm like, wait a minute, I could be onto something here. So that's when you always got to be adaptable to what's going on around you, and flexible. And I'm glad to see that you're looking all professional. We're not you when you're on the air, but we try our best to be informative.
Hey, Rosie, you're doing a great job. And two more questions for you before we let you go. And the first thing, and we talked about this at the beginning of the show, I mean, you're out in Henderson Harbor right now, you're fishing. I mean, that's always been your true love. And I mean, even when you and I work together, I mean, you're always talking fishing and fishing lures and this fish and that fish. And I'll never forget the times where, you know, you'd sit with my son, Aaron, and the two of you would talk fishing because he loves fishing too. But that's always been your first love. And people that know you know that you're a fisherman at heart. And that's something that's always been true to you is fishing.
You know, the funny thing is I started fishing because my grandmother took me with her fishing, and I started catching fish, and she was saying like, "Oh, what a good boy." And I was like, wow, I didn't break anything. I pretty much broke everything I touched when I was a little kid. So to be able to sit down around adults and do something that I got praised for, I was like, I know what I'm going to start focusing on. And so that was my focus. And it gave me so much joy to bring joy to my mother and my grandmother at the time, and then people around me. And I enjoyed doing it it's something that I could work on my own. And that's how it became a passion for me. And then I started figuring things out. You know, if you stay out there long enough, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So bit by bit, we figured things out, and it's and I truly enjoy it. So it would be ideal for me to be able to teach that, or even set up opportunities for kids to learn how to fish. That would be something fantastic. I started another company, Bouie and Associates, that eventually I'll be doing some work with around the city of Syracuse. So I just got qualified just before the beginning of January, or mid-January. So there's a lot of things in the works. I'm always fluid, flexible, and I got my little bunker in Kendall is wired like the space shuttle. So I got green screens and cameras and computers. So then when I finish the show, I can just turn it off and go outside and go fishing.
Nice. And Rosie, I appreciate all the time you give me. I got one more question, and you don't know what's coming at you. This is a question that my wife, Jen, and you know, she's one of your biggest fans. She said, when I told her that you're coming on the show, she said, you need to have Rosie tell everybody about his famous Jeep. Now, for those people that don't, Rosie bought a Jeep. I believe it was in 1980 when you first went to Italy. You bought that Jeep, and that baby lasted until what, 2015?
Well, I actually bought my first one that year. It was a 4-cylinder, and then I took it over. Didn't have quite enough power, so I ended up selling the first one. The second one I bought in '85, and I've had it for over 30 years. It's been to Italy, it's been to Sicily, it's been to Monte Bianco, and it's been across the borders. I've driven it literally everywhere, and it had no top or doors for 25 years. I brought it back here and finally put a hard top on it. And Ewing Graphics did some fantastic basketball graphics all over it. And I played golf for some of the guys from Napa Auto Parts. And while I was out there, they said, I said, well, you need any parts? I was like, well, I could use an engine, a radiator, a gas tank, just for starters. They was like, okay. So I played with their clients. So I go and I order my parts and I come back and they said, so nice. Well, they're so nice to give me these parts. I'll buy everything else that I need. I'll buy it from them. Get all the stuff put on the counter. They pat me on the back, said, see you later. So I have a 1984 Jeep CJ7 that's totally rebuilt from the ground up. It's got 33-inch rims, these big gigantic tires, lift kit. When I open the door, I almost fall out of it. But it is, and I still have it now. I took it out, revised it. Now it's painted flat black because I want to be tough. So I had it painted flat, black, and it still has a hard top on it. I took the doors off and threw them away. So I was like, okay, I'm almost tough. I'm getting a little older, so I'm almost tough. So I have no doors and a black Jeep I can get a running start and slide all the way underneath it without touching it. Well, that is my passion.
I will never forget. It was, I think it was 2015, and you had trouble starting that car, and I was with the production crew and Coach Neer, and we all were shooting fingers to see who was following you home to make sure you got that Jeep home, because we weren't sure you were getting from downtown Rochester to Kendall that night. But sure enough, that baby got you home like it always does, old reliable.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, with a tin can and a piece of wire, you can. And if it doesn't start, I just push it over to a hill. You're going down the hill, pop the clutch. I actually spun out on Interstate 90. I was going the wrong way, and I'm in a big snowbank. I'm buried. And I was like, I remember thinking when I went to the snowbank after I spun out, I was like, I didn't hit anything. I didn't feel it. I just hit this big snowbank. The snow is right up to the windshield. I go there, I was like, oh, I'm not in four-wheel drive. I dig out the wheels because you have to manual put it in the four-wheel drive. I waited for a break in traffic, and I was coming back to do the show, to do the Duke show with Time Warner. I got there a few minutes late. So I'm facing east on the westbound lane. So I wait for the traffic to break up. I put it in four-wheel drive, and I punched it. I did a 360, headed right on home, and I just kept looking at this car. And I was like, yep, this is my baby. Follow me all over the world. She's still taking good care of me.
And if that story doesn't epitomize who Roosevelt Bouie is, I don't know what does. Rosie, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. It was great catching up with you.
My pleasure. And I'll catch up with you. I got to see the little ones because I hear Aaron is like industrial size now.
He's getting almost eye to eye with you. So we're going to get you out to the house pretty soon. Everybody, that is Roosevelt Bouie, Syracuse basketball legend, the pride of Kendall High School. That wraps up our edition of Homegrown this week. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brendan McDaniels. We appreciate you watching. If you would like to see somebody else that you know from the Rochester area that you'd like to see on the show, email us at rocksportsnet@gmail.com, or you can go to www.brendanmcdaniels.com. Click on the Homegrown button. There's a little form you can fill out. Let us know who you'd like to see. We appreciate it. And for everybody here at Rock Sports Net, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.